Hey everyone, we are going over Uncanny X-Men 298. This is the kickoff issue. Well, not necessarily the kickoff, but the prelude kickoff issue to Fatal Attractions as everything builds up to that major. The print date for this was 1993. And let's just go ahead and dive into it. I picked this up at my local library. I figured, as much as I love going through singles, I always get reluctant to pull out all of my single issues and always worrying about ripping them up. So I always try to find reprints or a second like reader copy and all that stuff. But I figured this has a good chunk of it collected. So let's dive into Uncanny X-Men 298. And I love this opening picture of Xavier. This is so akin to something you would see like in a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four or Inhuman comic. And Scott Liddell, my goodness, I did not realize how long he was on the book after Claremont. So he was one of the ones that spearheaded, what was it? The Age of Apocalypse, the Executioner song, Fatal Attractions, Onslaught. He kept the book going for quite a while after Claremont. You know, we had Nikezia and stuff, but they were always kind of coming and going. But Liddell worked on Uncanny, Generation X, X-Men, I think, and other books as well. And what I loved most about his time is he really did make it a point to make you feel like you're reading something from Claremont. What do I mean about that? Let's dive in and just look at this beautiful composition as we hear how this scene is set. Soft spoken, contemplative, confined to a wheelchair. It is easy to underestimate Professor Charles Xavier, the reclusive genetic researcher, headmaster of an exclusive school for gifted youngsters. Easy because his most impressive accomplishments cannot be shared with the rest of the world. That's how we introduce a character. And again, I've said this so many times, I'm sure y'all are blue in the face with hearing me say it, but your first comic that you ever pick up should be that first comic that gets you excited and want to continue the story and go back and learn more. And here, if you've never read X-Men in your life, like I did around this time period, this is a great way to kind of get an idea of who he is without all the decades of history that was put on top of this. And so, again, 1993, one thing, even though I said this very much has a Kirby-esque feel, just the look of it as we turn the page and see that it's more like a spherical thing, I cannot help but wonder if that was inspired by the Lawnmower Man, because the gyro thing that we always spin in, that was very much an Aiken part of that movie. Now, before we continue, let's talk about who made the book. And I hate when they abbreviate the names because I always forget all of their names. So I'm just going to abbreviate them, and you guys can just make fun of me down in the comments. S. Lobdell Writing, Scott Liddell. B. Peterson Pencils. A. Milgram, Al Milgram Inks. Chris Yiannopoulos. And Marie Yavins doing the colors. Bob Harris, editor. And Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief. And this is called For the Children. And we got some awesome names on this book. His ready room is but one example in this computer chamber several hundred meters below his Westchester estate. Professor X has access to information gathering sources from across the globe, some obtained legally, others less so. Possessed by the most powerful mutant mind on the planet, his brain can absorb and process impossibly huge amounts of raw data in an astonishing short amount of time, all of which places Charles Xavier in the inevitable role of lone witness to what may very well be the first day of the end of the world. And so we get this idea of who he is, and we can see that he's not at his best as he tries to physically speak. He goes, enter. And then he uses his mind. I said enter. And Bishop comes and he goes, it's been 73 hours since you've sequestered yourself. You can assure Ms. Gray and the others that I'm more than capable of taking care of myself. I don't doubt that, sir. None of us do. Actually, I was hoping to discuss a matter of more personal nature. And I just love this close-up shot here of him kind of resigning himself. And he goes, of course, how egocentric of me. And I hate to say it. I know this is supposed to be a kind of serious moment between him and Bishop, but that just kind of reminds me of something from Ace Ventura. He was like, let's just do all the things you want to do. It just makes me laugh. But essentially, at this point, Bishop is new to the X-Men. Like he was just, what is it called? Introduced not that long ago. It was like what, this is 298. I think it was in the 240s, 230s, something like that. We've gone over it, so I'll leave a card. But anyway, he goes, while it shames me to admit this, it's obvious to all parties concerned that admitting me into the X-Men was premature at best. In the future where I was raised, my direct approach was more. And see, I love when the letter can add emotion. So see how we kind of get the regular typing, but then it says more than acceptable, basically emphasizing what he's trying to get at. It says, indeed, it was absolutely necessary. Clearly, that is not the case in the here and now. Rather than continue as a disruptive influence, I regretfully tender my resignation. And Xavier's just saying, rubbish. Though it seems contrary, attending Xavier means more than fighting for a world that both fears and hates us. This is also a school about learning. If you fail, then I fail. And that's the Xavier I know, not this one that everyone's kind of been building up and making him this huge monster through all the years, making him such an asshole, which I've not liked. Just really tarnished both him and Cyclops' image of what they were supposed to be. Now, there's a caveat to that where when Claremont was kind of forced to work around Jean Grey being brought back, it still kind of irks me that they made him essentially just walk out on Maddie to go to X Factor. That irked my girl, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, he says, that's not going to happen, Bishop. You never struck me as one to give up easily. Therefore, your resignation is not accepted. Do I make myself clear? Crystal, sir. And that's how Xavier is. He even though he sees where people may have flaws or rough edges, Wolverine being a prime example, he's still saying, we're going to learn together. And if you fail, it's on me because I'm your leader. I'm your teacher, as a good teacher should be. Now, with all that aside, we go to our Mother of the Sacred Heart, which is like a school for children with special needs. We are talking about, what is her name? Sharon Friedlander. Now, if that name sounds familiar, we'll get into that in just a second and why this is important. She's talking about how she, worked for Xavier, but she's kind of glad to come here and still help students. But she says, here I don't have to worry about having my molecular structure rearranged on the whim of one mad mutant or the next. Now, spoilers if you've never read this, so pause this, go check out the book, come back, and you're back. Punch to the throat, her neck is immediately snapped. And we see all these feet coming in. Cargo, was that necessary? Probably not, but it was fun. For you, maybe. But Flat Scan here didn't seem to enjoy it. So basically, she was murdered. And that is just heartbreaking. And the reason I say that is her and, let's skip a few pages here just to kind of get what I'm getting at. What's his name? They say Mr. Corsi. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. But those two names, if they sound familiar to you, they were introduced, I believe it was in New Mutants issue 16, and I think it went from 16 to 18, and then on to Muir Island when they introduced Legion. But they were the ones that were psychically merged and manipulated by the Demon Bear. And it took the New Mutants to save them, and then they went on to help with Moira at the Muir Island facility. So she was finally glad to be away from that. Of course, he kind of became a bus driver for the kids to come to this school. And it just breaks my heart that, we started to build a rapport with these characters, and now they're both. I'm not sure about Corsi, but we know that poor Sharon here was murdered in cold blood. That was heartbreaking. But at least I like that Scott Liddell, at least, even though they were killed off rather quickly, at least he gave homage to characters that came before. And that's more of a running theme here, which we'll get into. The school's immediately blown up. And then we see that it's Magneto's acolytes. I trust we got their attention. And I trust that you're an idiot, Killstock. If you and your brothers jeopardize the gifted with your reckless behavior, you will answer to no less than Cortez himself. Screwing the unidentified mutant is only part of the inquest, Unicyon, I'm not sure how her name's pronounced. There is also the cleansing of the young humans from the gene pool. Such is our right, our responsibility as acolytes. Again, I love how the letter is able to emphasize things and kind of add their own flavor to the book, which you don't see a whole lot of anymore. But Corsi ain't having none of that. I just love it. He just comes full on attacking. Now, I don't know exactly what happens to him because we don't see. I think he was killed. And before we get further into that, I skipped a couple of pages because I also wanted to bring up. And before all this happens, Detective Charlotte Jones, she had a relationship with Warren and X Factor, and I'm not sure what happened to them after the Endgame arc where Cable was sent into the future, which we have gone over. But I like that she at least is brought in to the fray here to help Xavier. She's now a detective in New York City, and she goes, "Here's the information that you asked for. But how do I know that I'm doing this of my own free will? How can I be sure that you're not using your mental powers on me?" And Storm's just like, "Charlotte, that's a perfectly reasonable question, Storm. Honestly, detective, there's no way for you to truly know. In this matter, I'm afraid you're just going to have to trust me." But before she can go on, that's when Xavier gets a mental scream from help from Sharon, which brings us into the fray of here where the X-Men are now en route to stop the Acolytes and try to save the kids at Corsi's sacrifice to keep them away from the bus. And man, the Acolytes, I forgot how ruthless they are. I mean, they look right at Jean and they say, "You see how easily your comrade has fallen gray. Is there still a chance to save yourself, to change your alliance? If you are not with us, you are against us." And I just love that nod to the Phoenix power. And she goes, "I am most definitely against you." And just because Jean, other than Xavier, is one of the most powerful mutants on the planet, she takes them down and like blasts from her. "Magnus was a great man, one who was not afraid to make difficult decisions. Don't dare bully shame his name, painting him a coward. He died for our sin crimes, so that mutants must inherit the earth." And these guys, just the way they merge into each other is so much akin to Hellraiser. And the action just continues. And look at the artwork. My God, look at how beautiful all the line work, the ink work, the colors, the use of color, the way Warren busts out after being taken down by the Acolytes. We just get the yellow with all the action lines and the water. I miss traditional comic work so much like this. Like we see how they've gotten huge from merging into one another as Bishop goes to take them on. And then the use of the yellows and the oranges and the blacks just to exaggerate how Bishop's going to try to absorb all this energy to take down the Acolytes. Every time I see stuff like this, it makes me miss this era of comics. Even, and this one thing I had to go over this particular collected trade for is it shows all the Flair Ultra cards that were part of this series, kind of teasing at what's going to be happening in Fatal Attractions. And this was the card series that I had, the 95 Chromium trade card. Oh, I think this was one of the first times I was introduced to what happened to Wolverine at the hands of Magneto. These were all beautifully, masterly painted, and I just miss stuff like this so much, guys, in the storytelling. Scott Liddell, Fabian Nicieza, everyone had their own style. But I like that they always kind of gave homage to how Claremont built the characters. Because if you think about all the movies and TV shows that have been made, even in all their own, iterations, there's always that Chris Claremont bits, Bob McLeod's takes, Louis Simonson and the Santis takes that make them these timeless stories. And so seeing how everyone paid homage to Claremont while also paving their own way makes me love this time more than anything. And I'm kind of biased too, because this was about the time I really started getting into X-Men as well. Speaking of, as we go in the 299 next, that was the first Uncanny X-Men comic that I had ever owned, and it's still one that I hold close and near and dear. So guys, if you've enjoyed what you've seen, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever you to get your action figures and comics, and grab all these individual single issues if you can. If not, Fatal Attractions has been reprinted several times. I like this one because it gives all the issues leading up to why decisions are made leading up into the main event. And so if you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate you taking a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little X bell, next subscribe. That was I can tip more content. You guys get notified. Come to the channel. And I love talking to you and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.